Coming up on Arirang News, another typhoon is on its way to South Korea, expected to make landfall near Busan in the early hours of Thursday. Forecasters expect this storm will be much stronger than the one that hit the Seoul area last week. South Korea reports 267 more cases of the coronavirus. There's a growing number of patients who are critically ill. They're concentrated in the greater Seoul area, which is under strengthened social distancing this week. And consumer prices were up in August by 0.7%. Still far short of the government's target, but an improvement from previous months. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. We start with the latest on Typhoon Maysak. The storm has already interrupted flight and ferry operations to and from Korea's southern resort island of Jeju and is on course to reach the mainland. Our Choi Won-jong joins us live from Busan, where the storm is expected to make landfall overnight. Won-jong, what can you tell us?
Well, good afternoon, Devin. Where I'm standing right now in Busan is the most southern part of the mainland Korea, and we're expecting to see the typhoon arrive here very soon. The typhoon has not made a landfall yet, but as you can see, we are starting to see some rain, and the wind has just begun to pick up. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, on Wednesday, the typhoon Maysak is expected to arrive near Busan early Thursday morning at approximately 3 a.m. Korea time. Based on the data as of 12 noon, the central pressure of the typhoon is at 945 hectopascals, the maximum wind speed of 162 kilometers an hour. They also point out that this typhoon is going to be much stronger than the previous one, Typhoon Bavi. That is why the Busan Port Authority has already urged people to secure their boats and implemented a 24-hour monitoring system to keep tabs on the latest updates. Meanwhile, over in Jeju Island, the flights and around 15 ferry operations have been rescheduled or canceled. The health authorities have raised the typhoon advisory to warning for all of Jeju. The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters also raised emergency countermeasure levels to the highest to prevent any potential damage from the typhoon. We'll bring you more updates in our later newscast. Choi Won-jong reporting live from Busan. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Won-jong, thank you, and stay safe. We can hear the announcement out there on the beach telling everyone to do the same. Appreciate it. Now, South Korea has reported an additional 267 cases of COVID-19. Among those confirmed on Wednesday, 253 were local transmissions, with more than 70% coming from the greater Seoul area. This brings the total caseload to 20,449. The number of daily new infections has been below the 300 mark for 4 straight days, a decline from last week's daily peak of more than 400. But it's been in the triple digits for almost 3 weeks straight. The number of critically ill patients reached 124 on Wednesday, and there were 2 additional deaths. President Moon Jae-in has issued a statement of thanks today to South Korea's nurses for their hard work amid the COVID-19 pandemic and the doctors' strike. In posts on social media, President Moon said he's grateful but also sorry that the nurses have had to take on the work of the doctors who are protesting against the government's medical reform plans. The president asked the nurses not to lose courage, saying that the people are aware of their hard work. He also promised to lessen their difficulties by adding more personnel and improving their working conditions, among other things. Many trainee doctors have been on strike since last month against the government's plans to expand medical school admissions and to establish public medical schools. In spite of the coronavirus outbreak, North Korea appears to be rehearsing for a massive military parade slated for next month to showcase its new strategic weapons. The U.S. monitoring website 38 North says satellite imagery taken on August 31st shows hundreds of vehicles parked in the northwest parking lots adjacent to the parade grounds. Thousands of troops were also spotted in formation near the parade grounds, which replicate Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang. 38 North says this indicates preparations are underway for the parade to mark the 75th anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea on October 10th. The United States has issued an advisory against North Korea's continued activities to secure equipment and materials for its nuclear and missile programs. It also warned those who help the regime that they may be subject to U.S. and international sanctions. Lee Seung-jae reports.
In its latest warning titled North Korea Ballistic Missile Procurement Advisory, the U.S. government on Tuesday explained Pyongyang's deceptive techniques employed in the operation and support of its weapons programs. According to the advisory jointly issued by the State, Treasury, and Commerce Departments, the North may be continuing and possibly evolving activities to secure equipment and materials for its nuclear and missile development programs. It also warned that those aiding the rogue regime, even unknowingly, may be subject to U.S. and international sanctions. The advisory includes a list of 6 North Korean entities that have been identified and sanctioned for weapons procurement activities. This includes Korean Yeongbong General Corporation, which it said was a defense conglomerate specializing in acquisition for Pyongyang's defense industries. It also delved into how the North seeks to procure materials and equipment that are prohibited under various U.S. and UN sanctions, including via officials who operate from North Korean diplomatic missions or trade offices, as well as third country nationals and foreign companies. North Korea has been and remains subject to various U.S. and UN sanctions that followed its nuclear and missile tests. The North's last nuclear test, and its 6th, was conducted in September 2017, around a year before the historic summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. However, many believe the regime may have resumed its nuclear development program after the second Kim-Trump summit in 2019, which ended without a deal. The first joint advisory by the 3 U.S. departments comes ahead of the November presidential election. Many political observers say military provocations, especially a resumption of long-range missile tests, may undermine President Trump's argument that his engagement with Kim has kept the U.S. out of a war with the regime. 이승재, Arirang News.
South Korea's consumer prices rose in August by 0.7% compared to a year earlier, the biggest rise in 5 months. According to Statistics Korea, the consumer price index this month stood at 105.5. That's also up 0.6% from the previous month. The agency attributed the rise to higher prices for agricultural goods following a record-long monsoon season and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Agriculture, livestock, and fishery product prices rose 10.6% on year, marking the biggest rise since 2017. South Korea is seeing an export surplus in the music business. The newly released figures come a matter of days after K-pop superstars BTS became the first South Korean artist to top the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart. According to the Bank of Korea, the country recorded a surplus of $18.4 million for, quote, music, video, and related services in June, recording a surplus for the 9th straight month. The trade index for this category had been rising for almost 5 years until last September, when the surplus flattened out. South Korea's finance ministry is forecasting that if current trends continue, the country's debt-to-GDP ratio could almost double over the next 40 years to more than 80%. Right now, it's at 43.5%, but if economic growth remains low and population falls, then by 2060, it could rise to 81.1%. If things change and the working population increases, however, then it might stay under 80%. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks in New York overnight closed strongly higher on signs of a recovery in manufacturing. The S&P and the Nasdaq closing at new all-time highs. What was the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, August has been a really great month for S&P and Nasdaq. They had the best August in 30 to 35 years. Dow hasn't been doing as well, but all 3 major stock indices either surpassed or comes very close to the level that it was during the beginning of the year. So, in a sense, they have recovered from the coronavirus shock. Dow rose 7.6% during August. It's down just 0.4% compared to beginning of 2020. That's excluding dividends. S&P rose 7% for August. and it's up 8.3% for 2020. NASDAQ went up 11%, for August. And from beginning of 2020, the value rose by a whopping 38.7%. So it's almost like for NASDAQ, coronavirus is actually good for it. And taking account of the tech-heavy nature of NASDAQ and how technology has gained value because of the lockdown and shutdown from coronavirus, that is in part understandable. But still, the price-earning ratios are historically high for the stock market as a whole. The market valuation is also near a historic high, so it's questionable whether firms deserve such high stock prices. Theoretically, stock prices represent weighted average of all future earnings, and it's doubtful that coronavirus has increased the future potential earnings this much. So the current rise seems to be depending more on short-term factors like low interest rates than any future changes in future profitability. European stocks, FTSE had largest fall in 3 months despite manufacturing rebound in the United Kingdom. Other European markets fell yesterday and Monday, but it seems to be recovering somewhat today. Asian markets, Chinese markets have been falling, but the Nikkei, Japanese market, seems to be doing well, and that's probably because the market fell on Friday due to Prime Minister Abe's announcement that he was stepping down. But the gain seems to be because, well, the transition process to a new prime minister seems to be going well. For Korean markets, KOSPI, it's rising on Tuesday and today. KOSDAQ, it's been rising all week. The KOSPI is up 7.6% for the entire year. KOSDAQ is all up whopping 29.4% since the beginning of the year. So at least for the Korean stock markets, KOSPI and KOSDAQ seems to be over coronavirus like the U.S. stock.
It's an amazing thing to see. Well, speaking of South Korea, and its government budget for next year is around 555 trillion won, which is, of course, a record. We're getting close to $500 billion now. What do you make of this spending plan for 2021?
Okay, well, if you look at the details, then there are large increases in R&D category, industries, small, medium-sized enterprises, and energy category. That's because of the Moon administration's Korea New Deal plans that are coming into effect. The largest component of budget for next year is health, welfare, and employment. That's 199.9 trillion won. That's 36% of the budget. And of that, the employment component is the largest component at 30.6 trillion won. And not only is this component large, its increase is also very high. It's gone up 10.7% compared to last year. If you just look at the employment component, it went up 20%. But there was a lot of criticism about some of these programs before the coronavirus. Most of it was used for 20-year-old subsidy for young people getting jobs. Also, a lot of temporary jobs for older retirees being created. Those were thought of as not being very good quality jobs. Once the government program is over, those jobs will disappear. So we really need to evaluate the effectiveness of these programs. And then another factor that is somewhat worrying is that the second largest component of the budget is general and regional administration. And it has two subcomponents. One is assistance to regional governments. That fell. But there's the other component, which includes general administration as well as central government and regional government employees. And that has really risen a great deal. It's 34.8 trillion won, and it rose by whopping 29.7%. Now, there has been concerns about this before, but if the government uses new government employees to prop up the unemployment numbers, that it may be good for short-term unemployment figures, but in the long term, it creates just so much burden for the government budget in the future, and the increase in the government's debt to GDP ratio is going up quite quickly under the Moon administration, not only in this year's and next year's budget, but for their budget projections up to 2024 as well, that it is really concerning. We really need more spending to combat coronavirus, but we also need to make sure that the money is being used effectively.
All right, Professor Yang, we'll have to leave it there for today. Just run out of time. Thanks so much for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the South Korean company Kakao Games has set a new record ahead of its upcoming IPO. On Wednesday, at the end of the two-day public subscription session, Kakao Games was reportedly oversubscribed among retail investors by a multiple of 1,500, the most of any IPO to date. It's more than 4 times the previous record set earlier this year by SK Biopharmaceuticals. Subscription deposits for shares in Kakao Games were estimated at nearly $49 billion. The company will sell a total of 16 million shares when it debuts on the KOSDAQ a week from now on September 10th. 20% of those shares are allocated for individual investors. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.